Welcome back to Law and Crime Live, where you were just watching testimony from Madison Nygaard, who was the minor at the time of the alleged kidnapping of at the time of her alleged kidnapping, by Jeffrey Willis, whom this trial, that abduction trial, will resume at a later date. We still have Richard Tendler with us this morning to provide us with some great legal analysis. Richard, thanks so much for being with us this morning. You heard this testimony from Madison Nygaard during direct examination. Now, usually during direct examination, we allow the witness who's testifying to pretty much tell the story at their own leisure, and then and then you'll have the prosecutor or the defense, what have you, will kind of chime in from time to time. But we see, I've noticed a different tactic on behalf of this prosecutor in this case, in which he is kind of asking her question after question after question. Do you think that there's a particular reason for that?
I don't know. Sometimes it's style. You know, a lot of it was leading, and you're not allowed to ask leading questions on direct, but as a defense attorney, you can't sit and object to everything coming in. So you just kind of let it roll. This prosecutor's done a pretty good job of taking the jury, you know, step by step. This is, you know, it is a difficult case, and it isn't in a lot of senses for this prosecutor. There's a lot of evidence that he's been able to get in that generally would not have gotten in, or, you know, years past, 15 years ago, you know, we wouldn't be having this trial. It's a circumstantial case on Jessica Harenga. However, they've been able to bring in all this evidence, all this prior bad act, all this evidence that is, quote, inextricably intertwined, that has nothing to do with that case. So, you know, the prosecutor's just piecing it all together and putting it all together for the jurors. It gets difficult for a prosecutor at times where, you know, the skilled thing that they need to do is to be able to walk that jury through it. Sometimes it's easier said than done.
Absolutely. And we do know that in this case, because Madison Nygaard's case will be tried at a later date, she's going to have to testify to all these things once again. And this is something that is not very common, especially since he's not been convicted in this crime. He's only been charged with, you know, with the kidnapping, or the attempted kidnapping, of Madison Nygaard. So we'll see how that plays out for the members of the jury once they begin deliberations, to see how, if any, this testimony from Madison Nygaard, which is pretty important, weighed in during their deliberations. What we're going to do now is we're going to continue forward with Madison's testimony from Tuesday, and then we'll come back to speak to Richard about it when we come back. Welcome back to Law and Crime Live. My name is Stephanie L. Willis, and we are still covering Michigan versus Jeffrey Willis. We have Richard Tendler with us here to provide us with some analysis. Richard, we just saw, or just watched, testimony from Susan Elliott Mosley, who was an Exxon customer and one of the last few people who saw Jessica Harenga before her disappearance on April the 26th of 2013. Now, it seems as if, you know, Susan's testimony is beginning to escalate and getting us to a high point. However, once we get down to the end of her testimony, especially during cross-examination, the brief cross-examination that was had, she stated that there was a creepy guy. Number one, she stated there was a creepy guy, or a guy that she thought that was creepy, who was at the gas station. But then she also stated that this creepy guy, she could not identify him as Jeffrey Willis. So this seems like a little bit of a handoff to the defense, because it seems like it seems to leave the door open for reasonable doubt that it could have been someone else who may have been involved in her disappearance. How do you take that?
Absolutely. And I think also the defense attorney brought out that, you know, you didn't see anything that would have startled you by it or anything like that. And you know, nobody called the cops at that time. Nobody, you know, felt that, you know, Jessica was under any type of, you know, danger or anything like that. So, Yeah, absolutely. It goes exactly what you're saying. It's creating that doubt. Don't forget, we still got Jessica's mother
Right.
telling everybody that, hey, she's still alive.
Right.
So it's a very circumstantial case that they have here.
And I wonder to myself, I wonder if anybody had even followed up on who this quote unquote creepy guy even was. And as a criminal defense attorney, do you think that you would have cross-examined Susan Mosley in regards to this individual, or would you have just left it open-ended so that you could argue it later during your closing arguments?
I think they needed to go after it a little bit more.
Okay.
You know, throughout this trial, and look, I don't want to second guess what attorneys are doing. You know,
right, of course.
They know their case better than any of us here. But there's been times where certain questions have been lacking, and they needed to pounce on certain things. And when you don't, you know, especially on this type of case where this judge has let pretty much the entire kitchen sink in, you got nothing to lose. Go after it.
Right, and we do know that there was a lot of evidence brought in that was allowed in, we'll say, by Judge Moretti in this case. Specifically, Judge Moretti allowed evidence of other crimes, specifically the murder of Rebecca Blesh and the alleged kidnapping of Madison Nygaard. We do know that he explained, and by him I'm stating specifically Judge Moretti, he stated that the evidence was relevant because it was an execution of a common plan or scheme. As you stated, a lot of evidence is coming in that really doesn't necessarily have much to do with this case, except for the fact that Madison Nygaard provided the identification as to whom Jeffrey Willis was, and she alleges that he attempted to abduct her on that day, on April the 16th of 2016. What we're going to do now is we're going to allow our viewers to see another clip from Craig Harpster, who was another Exxon customer, and he showed up at the Exxon at approximately 11 o'clock, around the time of Jessica's disappearance. So let's take a look at his testimony, and we'll discuss it when we return. Welcome back to Law and Crime Live. I am Stephanie L. Willis. It is 11:45 this morning. Recall, trial in the Michigan versus Jeffrey Willis case will not resume until 1:30 this afternoon. And so we'll be sure to bring you live coverage as soon as court begins again. We still have Richard Tendler with us this afternoon. And Richard, what we just saw was testimony from Craig Harpster. Craig Harpster was an Exxon customer who frequented, the gas station and was very familiar with the area. He testified that he had just gotten off of work and went over to the gas station to pump gas, and he was actually the one who realized that something was wrong. And this is a consistent, I guess, theme that I've heard from a lot of the witnesses who have been testifying, that they've just been having a bad vibe, or something seemed eerie or creepy. Explain why just saying that they sensed a bad vibe, why that kind of testimony is admissible.
Well, it's admissible because, you know, it explains, you know, what the situation is. So, you know, they're not asking anybody to comment on what somebody else said, but this is somebody who comes in, has been there every single day, and the place is empty. So, you know, I think you're right, Stephanie, where defense attorney maybe could have objected to, you know, certain references and certain ways that they said things, but he generally was talking about what he saw, where this individual came in and saw nobody working at the store, and they had been there before. So it explains the context of that 911 call, explains kind of what went on there. So it's coming in. Well,
it is coming in, but I don't know how how much I like it. And, you know, it doesn't really matter what I like. It matters what the judge allows into evidence. But it just seems as a common theme and a negative connotation with throughout this whole trial. The fact that there were eerie vibes or a bad vibe. We had Susan Mosley, who testified before that there was an individual there whom she thought was creepy. So everyone keeps insinuating the fact that there was just something wrong that happened that night. And I just think it's a bit far-reaching in my experience. But it is, as you stated, it is what they were experiencing at the time. So it doesn't really make a difference that the judge let it in. An objection probably would not have gone far by the defense. What we're going to continue doing is we're going to continue with our coverage. Richard will be with us for a little while longer. However, it's almost time for me to leave. You'll be in great hands with Caroline Polisi later on this afternoon after I sign off. But before I do, we're going to continue on with our coverage, and we're going to continue with the testimony from Eric Barber. Eric Barber is another witness from the Jeffrey Willis matter, and Eric Barber essentially provided some testimony stating that he went for a motorcycle ride because it was a nice night, and that he got into a description of where he was in the gas station parking lot. So let's take a look at that, and you'll be with Caroline when we return.